Do you want me to do a video of what we just did or no?
I mean, you don't need to because I get it, but
Okay. So
yeah,
suppose
I,
they write it like this instead of the blocks.
sometimes they do like a mix of both.
Okay. So what I recommend so you don't forget something
Mm-hmm.
is to do the technique that I showed you. So something's get you're gonna make something a circle. So I'm gonna make all the numbers a circle that are just numbers, and then I'm gonna make all of the x's a square. You can pick whatever you want; it doesn't matter. And then all of the x squared is going to be a triangle. And you're going to try to get in the sign that comes before, because sometimes it's going to be a negative sign and then you would have to do something with that, and I'll show you what that is. But for this one, it's all pluses. So I'm going to group everything together. And like I said, you always take the x squared first. So I'm going to say 2x, 3x, 4x squared. And then the x's are going to be 4x, 6x, 7, 8, 9x. And then my numbers are 7 and 3. So I just combine those. And then you just make sure, did I cross everything off? Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so sometimes you're going to have negative numbers like this. And then whatever comes before it, you're going to make sure that you put it in with the shape that you're using. And it's a little trickier because you have negative signs. So we're going to use, for the x's, I'll use a circle, and then for the x squared, I'll use a rectangle. Doesn't matter what you use, I'm just picking them randomly. And now, because it's positive and negatives, I'm actually going to write this out so I don't make a mistake. So I'm going to take all the numbers. Here's my 7 minus 3. And then I'm going to take all my x's, and I'm going to keep the sign, whatever's right before it, I'm going to keep it with the number. And then make sure that I have all of those. I do. And then I'm going to do, it doesn't matter the order you do it in, you just want to make sure to find all of them first. So 2x squared minus 1x squared plus x squared. Okay. Now, the reason why I wrote these out is because you have to do the negative and positive signs. So 7 minus 3 is going to be 4. And then this one, we have a negative and a negative x. So we're going to add those together. Negative 7x plus 2x. And then remember how I showed you how to figure out positive and negative numbers? Biggest integer wins the sign. Do you remember that?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so what's the biggest integer, 7 or 2?
7.
So my answer is going to be negative because the biggest integer
That's
wins the sign. And I have a negative and a positive, so I'm going to subtract my integers, and it's going to be negative 5x. Does that make sense? Okay. And then this one we're going to do, I have a positive and a positive, so that's 3x squared minus 1x squared. And then I'm going to do the same thing. What is my biggest integer? It's a 3. My 3 is positive, so I'm going to make a positive sign there. And then I have a positive and a negative, so I'm going to subtract the integers. So it's plus 2x squared. Now I'm going to put that all together with my x squared first, then my x, then my number. So we have 2x squared minus 5x plus 4.
okay.
So obviously it's more complicated when there's positive and negative signs. When they're all addition, it's way easier. So you just want to make sure that you kind of write it out like this so that you make sure you get the positive and negative signs in there. And then the next thing you will likely do is algebra. So I'll give you some easy algebra problems. And the first thing is when it looks like this, x plus 5 equals 10. So obviously you could tell that what belongs here is a 5, but we can't just put a 5 in there. We have to show the teacher how we got our 5. So this is the process. If you do it like this every single time, you'll love algebra. It'll be easy for you. All right. First step is to look at what they're doing. There's two sides of the equation. There's this side and there's this side of the equal sign. Your goal is to get all of your letters on one side and all of your numbers on the other side of your equal sign. So since my letter's already here, I'm going to move this 5 over to this side because my numbers have to be here. And the only way that in algebra that I can move from one side to the other is to do the opposite of what they're doing. So they're adding 5. What's the opposite of adding? I'm going to subtract 5. What I do to this side of the equal sign, I have to do to this side of the equal sign. So if I subtract 5 on this side, I subtract 5 on this side. And then this cancels each other out because plus 5 minus 5 equals nothing. So what's left on this side of the equation is an x. And then I do the math on this side. 10 minus 5 is 5.
Okay.
And the reason why we do this is because right now you can see what the number is, but when it gets more complicated, you will not just be able to go, oh, that's a 6, or that's a 2, or that's a 1/2. So we just learn this good habit, and then we can do it no matter how hard it gets and no matter how many steps. We just use this technique all the way down until we clear it and we get a letter equals a number. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to do a different variation of that, which is when they're minusing something. So we're going to use the same technique, letters on this side, numbers on this side. They're subtracting 5, so I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to add 5, and what I do to one side, I do to the other. What's left on this side is an x, and then I do the math. 10 plus 5 equals 15. Kind of makes sense?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. The next thing you'll see is when you have a letter and a number right next to each other, and then an equal sign. So for this means multiplication. They're multiplying 2 by x. So what's the opposite of multiplication? We have to divide to clear out the number and get it over here. Now, 2 divided by 2 is 1, so that clears out the numbers. And anything we do to one side, we do to the other. So if we divide 2 on this side, we have to divide 2 on this side. What's left on this side is x, and then 10 divided by 2 equals 5. Then our last type of problem is a division problem like this. So they're dividing, so we have to do the opposite. If they're dividing by 2, we multiply by 2, and that's how we show it. We show it in parentheses with the number that is on the bottom or the denominator. And then since we're multiplying by 2 here, we multiply by 2 on the other side. What we do to one side of the equal sign, we do to the other. This cancels each other out. What's left on this side is x, and then 20 times 2 is 40. Kind of makes sense? If you watch it a few times,